We know shoplifting is on the rise, and then there'll be a security guard there, but then you'll see someone's filmed it and the security guards not intervening with the shoplifters. They're actually watching them load the bags with either, let's say it be alcohol or stuff off the shelf, and then watch them walk out the door. And then you'll get mixed comments. Some people will say, why didn't that security guard intervene?
What I will say is 25 years ago, we were night watchmen. And I say that, watchmen, because you'd very, very rarely see a female operating. And the duties were solely focused around that sort of deterrence, intruder, anti-theft.
Can you just remind the viewers, and also myself, how long have the SIA actually been around where they brought the regulation into guarding?
I think using intelligence in the right way is so key in being able to succeed, prove to our customers and the public that kind of job is being received and perceived in the right way.
And that's what a lot of our job is in security, isn't it? It's dispersing the problem away from the given geography or location that we're there to protect. The offender will not pack up and go home, they'll go somewhere else.
We get a lot of people watching these conversations, but not everyone follows the show. If you find this useful, subscribing and following Room Secured really helps us keep doing these. Let's just dive straight into this. So one of the first questions I want to open up this podcast with is, when you look back over the last 10 to 15 years, what's the biggest change you've seen in how guarding operates on a day-to-day basis?
I'll take this if you like, and it's my 25th year in the industry since starting as a security guard. What I will say is 25 years ago, we were night watchmen. And I say that, watchmen, because you'd very, very rarely see a female operating. And the duties were solely focused around that sort of deterrence, intruder, anti-theft. A lot more of the focus now is on people protection, rightly so. And the duties, I think that's the biggest thing, the duties of a security guard have expanded somewhat, and the expectations, primarily through the SIA, a good regulator, but the need for additional training, so things like safeguarding, counter-terrorism, violence against women and girls, conflict management, physical intervention, and the biggest one being first aid. The SIA saying, look, every security guard should have an emergency first aid qualification, which is fantastic for the industry, but fantastic for wider society as well. Over 1 million people have been through the SIA qualification system. There's 1 million more first aiders in the UK, but we've seen the industry expand somewhat as well. The guards more typically 10, 15 years ago would have been just seen at night or not seen. Maybe behind a screen, less visibility. You're far more likely to see them in public places now, doing a job that would have been more typically done by the police 10, 15 years ago.
I think for me, interestingly, I probably started about 12 years ago. And I actually started from the retail side. And the first instruction I had, my assignment instruction, was just go and stand over there by that podium. And at the time, I had a real interest in understanding what technology sat behind that podium. And before you know it, I then became kind of regular break cover for that individual. And before I know it, I then kind of end up kind of running security for that shop. And I think technology is, and I'm sure we'll get into this in due course, technology has completely evolved the way officers work today. And I think using intelligence in the right way is so key in being able to succeed, prove to our customers and the public that that kind of job is being received and perceived in the right way.
You mentioned the SIA. Can you just remind the viewers, and also myself, how long have the SIA actually been around where they brought the regulation into guarding?
Yeah, so it was legislation was passed in 2001, the Private Security Industry Act, which was the start of the formation of the SIA. And then there was a series of milestones for it forming. Security guards first got licensed, I think, I need to cast my mind back some years, but I think it was maybe 2006 when the very first security guard license came out, and the first training session. It would have been very basic back then, maybe 1 or 2 days training, and that's been expanded upon since. And through a series of reviews, both the training and the license, and some of the biggest reviews are happening here and now in 2026.
And prior to the SIA sort of like forming, was it more like unregulated. It was like private security doors, and I know there's many stories in the past of you see who used to run the doors and stuff around Manchester. But was it just like private firms who'd?
It was the Wild West. I think door supervision was sort of regulated. Most towns and cities would have the local council regulate the door supervisors.
Okay.
Security guards, anyone could be a security guard. So there's some good companies out there, some good companies founded by former law enforcement, former military personnel, career professionals in security, who do an exceptional job. Some would argue better job than they've got today in terms of training the guards. And I know one company that doesn't exist anymore, but it had a 2-week residential training course before you become a security guard. And then part of that training, for example, was a Krypton Factor style assault course for security guards.
Wow.
You wouldn't see that nowadays. That company doesn't exist. But alongside that, for every one of those, there was 10 or 20 more who would literally be hiring security guards, thugs, someone down the pub. You come out of prison yesterday. Yep, perfect. That's just what we need. And love and hate on the knuckles. Let's have you.
And I suppose with that, you probably end up with, obviously, we've got 43 forces in the UK today from a policing perspective. You then end up with however many 100 different approaches to delivering that task at hand. So I'd imagine that kind of brought a lot of stability to the business.
What parts of guarding do you think haven't changed at all over the time? What's actually just stayed the same?
I suppose in theory, you can't beat that human presence. We're going to talk a lot about technology today.
Yes.
And as much as we augment the human presence with technology as an enabler and to do certain things, and sometimes it'll do a better job, but the feeling of safety that one human gets from having another human
just there
is not to be underestimated.
And I think it's probably the same for a colleague and a customer, right? So I think I remember kind of back in my days in security management, it was always the first thing is you're the first person that customer and colleague sees. So it's really important that you understand the environment you're in and you're kind of meeting and greeting them in the right way, which I guess is also the same in the nighttime economy.
Yeah.
We mentioned video surveillance, and it has been sort of like a natural evolution for security guards to basically utilize video surveillance within all aspects, whether it be retail or on doors or any kind of security. Do you think that's helped the industry, or not really? Has it moved people more towards just watching the technology as opposed to having that human presence, as you said, or has it helped it in a better way?
I think there's probably a couple of different answers to that question in a sense, and I see obviously the wide range of customers. Everyone approaches things in different ways, but I think certainly when I see some of the kind of latest and greatest technology, it always throws me back to that day 12 years ago, 11 years ago, when I was put on that front door and I thought, if only I had that back then, because whether it be the ability to click in a certain location and follow on to the next camera from a floor plan, or be kind of at the other kind of side of the scale, potentially using biometrics to identify individuals. There's so many things. I mean, for me, I think it's undoubtedly a positive thing, and I think, but back to your point, Peter, really, really important that there is that presence, because quite often, for me, I think it's all about not necessarily. Well, I think what's really important is making the people you're protecting feel safer, and that might not necessarily always be physically safer, because the environment may not allow for that. But that human presence is so important, and I think with kind of more handheld technologies becoming kind of more readily available, it potentially allows that person to move away from that podium where they might have been previously, or in that back office, and actually on the shop floor. I mean, it was just this weekend. I saw an officer in a large retailer, and he was in the aisle with a tablet reviewing CCTV. And for me, I think that's an awesome progression of technology, because previously you'd only be able to do that sat behind the podium or sat behind the reception area.
Do you find that the stores will invest that money into, like you're saying, because a tablet isn't cheap, and then for the security guard to have that tablet walking around the stores, and if they've got, let's say, 100 stores throughout the country, multiplying that by 100, more costs involved. Do you tend to see that the larger stores will invest that money into this technology?
I think ultimately it boils down to ROI. There's a lot of focus on the kind of return on investment, and I think when you put a safety lens on things, it's sometimes easier to bypass ROI. I mean, certainly from my prior history, when we were kind of putting together investment cases for things that were more safety focused rather than security focused, they kind of end up becoming non-returning in a sense. So they're not that invested in the ROI, more interested in kind of that general feeling and consensus. But I think there's a very fine line, and again, there's varying responses depending on how forward-thinking or how opinionated the individuals that are leading that organisation are. But I think the technology is getting cheaper, and that's the other thing. As time goes on, the technology advances, and actually what might have been 6 figures previously could potentially be 5 figures now. That then tips the balance from an ROI perspective. So I think it's always important to kind of keep on top of things from that point of view, because you might not need the latest and the greatest, but you might need to take a couple of steps forward rather than kind of several.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at your original question around cameras and surveillance, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it'd have been different to now. Cameras aren't a new thing, and sometimes people think there's a quick solution. Oh, I've been robbed, we've had a theft, put some cameras up.
Yeah, and they think that's going to solve everything.
Yeah, and it won't, but we are getting to a point now with the intelligence capability which you can put onto a system, or an AI bridge, for example, where you can do so much more. And we've all seen, guards in a control room, for example, attempting to watch 30, 40, 50, 100 monitors.
It's not possible.
No, they're going to miss things, and you can't do a good job. Whereas with AI bridges now, just drawing their attention to the incident of note, it's more possible than ever before.
You touched on a very good topic there with the AI. And I've seen recently quite a number of supermarkets and retail stores have adopted the use of facial recognition within their stores as well. So when you walk in, sometimes there's normally like a light near so it forces you to look up at the camera, and then you'll see small facial recognition in use. Now, how does that work on the guarding side? If someone was to flag up, known shoplifter, known offender, can your guards go and intervene and say to that person, sorry, you've been flagged up, you need to leave the store? How does it work in that aspect? Because we know how it's working when the police using it on the streets, but how does it work in a private environment?
Yeah, I mean, private property, ultimately, and the guards employed to deter or remove people from that property if need be. So deterrence is always best, the prevention. You want an early intervention. It's far easier to tell the individual they're not coming in than to tell the individual once inside you need to leave. But the average offender, for instance, if it's a shoplifter at a retail premise, they want an easy ride. So if they know they're going to get picked up on a camera and they see and it says AI recognition,
they won't go in there.
They see there's a gap, they'll go next door.
So deterrence is the step, in effect, as you said.
Yeah. And these people talk as well. If there's individuals getting deterred or new technology present, they'll speak to their networks as well. Avoid this place, and it's easier down the road. It's easier in the next neighbourhood, and that's what a lot of our job is in security, isn't it? It's dispersing the problem away from the given geography or location that we're there to protect. The offender will not pack up and go home; they'll go somewhere else.
I guess it depends on where the offender sits in that kind of criminal echelon. I guess there's always going to be those that just don't care, right? And for those, everybody has a budget, right? So they expect to lose X amount of money if we're talking about a retail environment, for example. But actually, exactly to your point, it's all about that kind of that approach, and it reminds me of the change back in my retail days from scone to a scone, where actually the A was put before the scone to say, well, actually, let's approach them first, because once you approach them, they know that you know of their presence, and quite often that then negated the need for there to be any further intervention.
Oh, okay. Still on the topic of intervention, I see many videos on the news and also in social media. We know shoplifting is on the rise. And then there'll be a security guard there, but then you'll see someone's filmed it and the security guard's not intervening with the shoplifters. They're actually literally just watching them load the bags with either, let's say it be alcohol or stuff off the shelf, and then watch them walk out the door. And then you'll get mixed comments. Some people will say, why didn't that security guard intervene? And then you'll get on this side, someone will say, well, why is he going to put his self at risk? He doesn't know of those people carrying a knife, are they armed, etc. What is the role? And then you'll get people saying, if he lays a finger on him, he's sacked. Policy this, policy that. From people dealing with security guards and employing them, what is the actual take on that?
I'd like to defend the typical security guard that you see on CCTV now. It's highly likely in most cases he's working to a policy, right, and that policy has been set by the retailer. The retailer, or the employee. Yeah. And they'll often say, the damage to the brand. I work with a lot of big blue chip brands, some of the biggest brands in the world, and they'll say, look, the damage to the brand, that little clip of that goes viral of the guard rolling about on the floor with an offender. Yeah, they've not seen the fact he might have spat in the face of the shop attendant and threatened them, and he's pillaging. He's been back every day for the past week, and this is what he does. They've not seen all that, but it could really damage the brand. And we're talking shareholder value here. We're talking people not visiting the store. So the damage done by the negative video clip, and now we've got a society of people who all have a really high quality video,
and it goes around viral. That clip can go viral within hours.
Minutes, and that risk is far bigger. There is some difference, and what I notice is if we're dealing with a manufacturer who makes their own product direct to consumer, they've got a far lower unit cost. And I'll give you an example. I work with loads of fashion brands and big sporting brands. And the famous phrase from one of them, I'll not name them, but was, we had a pair of trainers go out the door one day and they said, oh, well,
it's cost us X amount.
£8 down the drain, even though that trainer retailed at 100, 200, 300 pounds. Versus a retailer who's perhaps a middleman, they've not manufactured anything, they buy in that product, and they might buy a trainer that retails at £200, they've paid 100 for it.
Yes.
That's worth a lot more to them, and the two policies will differ there.
I guess it boils down to our AIs, and that's not artificial intelligence, that's our assignment instructions, right? Which will vary from customer to customer. And depending on, certainly from our perspective, and we've got customers kind of both ends of the spectrum, where some will have a very kind of hands-on policy, and some will have a very hands-off. And I think what's really important is that when there is the hands-on approach, that there is a consistent and continuous dynamic risk assessment being done, based on what that individual is doing, how they're doing it, who they are with. And I think when it's done in the right way and controlled, then there's absolutely a space for it. I think it's probably a good opportunity to talk about some of the work that goes on in business improvement districts as well, because I know that's a place that we're both in, and that's essentially where we'll have wardens across business improvement districts that will support via a network. No, also they'll actually support. So let's say we've got a retailer A and retailer B, and they're both suffering from organised or not crime. Actually, our business improvement district wardens can then support either the security provision of them sites A and B, even if there is an absence of a security provision there. So actually, rather than policing or securing one or two sites, they're securing any number of sites, and from that they can kind of help kind of change the way that this kind of crime is impacting and affecting.
Who funds the wardens in that aspect with the bids?
So it's ultimately funded by levy payers.
Right.
So I think there's around 350 just over 350 business improvement districts in the UK, and some will vary in kind of size, scope, and scale. Some will have lone wardens, some will have paired up, and some will even operate in teams.
Okay. Still, sort of like on the physical intervention, I think we've all seen. You've got your retail side of guards, but then when you've got your door supervision, like on bars, nightclubs, etc., you tend to see a bit more physical intervention on that side than you would do on the guarding side. Why is that? Is that because people are under intoxication and there's,
I think there's probably a different appetite to risk and different pressures as well. It's far more likely, especially in the nighttime economy or hospitality and leisure, where there'll be pressures on the venue that come from police licensing officers or council licensing officers. And the licensing objectives, there's 4 licensing objectives for any licensed premises. And one of them is the prevention of disorder, prevention of crime and disorder. You're obliged when you set up your bar, or your casino, or your theatre, to prevent it.
Okay.
And some of that will be the removal of individuals not welcome or misbehaving. Yeah.
Okay. I think certainly from our perspective, from a kind of DS officer perspective, we'll kind of generally operate in teams. So we don't really deal a lot with the nighttime economy, but we've got a kind of specialist group of individuals that will support any of our customers that are seeing kind of a series of serious and/or organised crime where there's a particular region or a particular area being hit, and those individuals are kind of they're at the they're trained in such a way that they can restrain and can safely kind of deal with individuals, and having that hands-on approach is really key, I think, in some circumstances.
I think, Fraser, you make a good point there about the size of teams. So from a safety point of view, if we're going to eject or remove someone from a site, our standard operating procedure, our safe operating procedure is 3 to 1. Okay. So if there's 2 individuals, causing bother in a bar who need to be removed physically, ideally you need 6 to do it safely. Yeah. And it's far more likely that in a nighttime economy or hospitality and leisure environment, you will have those types of numbers present, whether they're not from that particular premise or the premise next door may come and help, for example, if needed. And the other point to note is the terminology of door supervisor now. So the SIA, Security Industry Authority, will license at the moment about 500,000 licenses in total. A bit less, and some people have got dual licenses. There's not quite that many people, but 3/4 of them are door supervisor licenses. Door supervisors, the terminology, we typically think nighttime economy or hospitality and leisure. No, the average security guard now has got a door supervisor license. The training's probably not fit for purpose. The average security guard working at a retailer, for example, is also learning about capacity levels in about spiking of drinks, things which
no relevance in the
no. But that's the hand the SIA have been dealt with the Private Security Industry Act 2001 and up for legislative changes to make sure that the licensing scheme we've got for the UK is fit for purpose in the future, and he will change legislation if need be. But the SIA will do everything in their power to review things, and one thing they're talking about at the moment is there a need to review the terminology. At the moment we've got security guards and door supervisors and CCTV operators, key holders, and close protection.
All passed under like one kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, my argument. I think France have got a good system whereby it's, you look after the public, or you don't.
Okay.
And because the risk is so much bigger with looking after the public, your obligation, the value on someone's safety or life is so big compared to looking after a warehouse full of goods, for example. So in France, you don't need a license to look after the warehouse full of goods. Just employ who you want. However, if you're working on the streets or you're in charge of the capacity or the evacuating people in the event of a fire, you need a license.
You need that training and that license. A good topic you just touched on again is, let's say, guarding like a warehouse, etc. And now, I think I was having a discussion with Fraser a few weeks back, is the use of robots and other technology that we've got. Do any of you or any of your sites utilize any kind of robotic devices in guarding any sites?
So not necessarily. I think there's definitely a place for them. I think I've seen actually a number of them in supermarkets of recent where you've got multi-purpose robots in a sense. So they're not just doing the job of a security officer or a security robot. They've also got maybe cleaning utensils on the bottom or customer service assistants at the top. So actually by kind of combining it all in one, we're ultimately looking at increasing that ROI that we spoke about previously. So by there being a number of different elements in that robot, they're obviously helping pay back ROI. I most recently saw one actually in Morrison's that was cleaning the floor, but could also help direct a customer to a location. And I think it also had some kind of product dimension to it as well, where it was scanning shelving to identify maybe out of stocks or something else.
Okay. Have you guys come across any kind of?
No, I think there's lots of fads out there at the moment. You know, we've all seen the robot dogs, for example. And, people are trying to enter the market with sort of patrol devices with a camera on, but you sometimes look at what problem they're trying to solve versus fixed cameras, for example. And me and Fraser both talked about drones earlier, and Fraser's doing some really exciting things from a security point of view with drones, and we do things from a crowd management point of view with drones. I think we will see it, and we will see like the Tesla robots, for example, and the sort of price point they're looking at coming in, £50,000 a year or so. And you think, well, how much does the average guard cost you? If you're securing a site 168 hours a week, you know that you've got a cost, you know, in excess. It's six figures. It's £150,000, depending on what the guard's paid. Versus
a robot that can do 24 hours a day because there's no time limit on, you know, kind of breaks and all the other health and safety things you've got with it.
Depending what the task is. You know, I don't think a robot would make, you know, if my kids went missing, I don't want them to report to a robot and the robots look after them. But depending what the problem is, you know, if I had a warehouse to patrol inside and outside and stock levels to look at, for example, I could see the attractiveness in that.
Yeah, I see there being another place where they can support from kind of like a health and safety perspective as well. So what we haven't really spoken about is what security officers are sometimes asked to do to support from a health and safety perspective. And I think about that could be something like a propped open fire exit. That could be some kind of egress point that's been propped open or secured in a certain way. And I think that is where we're going to see potentially some of the ROI start to flip. But I think the bit to remember is this technology is still fairly expensive. And again, depending on the environment, on how dynamic that environment is, obviously you've got kind of robots that might have wheels. You've then got robots that might be walking, kind of like Spot the Dog from Boston Dynamics. Or you've obviously then got these that are coming over from kind of the east, where they're a lot more agile. And actually, if you were to push them over, they'd get back up quicker than any of us three sat here today. So I think it's a very interesting space to see how it evolves over the coming years.
Just a quick reminder that today's episode is sponsored by Suprema. Suprema is a global leader in AI-powered access control and security solutions. By leveraging AI, cloud, and video analytics technologies, Suprema delivers cutting-edge security products and services. With a presence in over 140 countries, the company has built a reputation as a premium global brand.
Peter mentioned drones, and again, another conversation that I've had with yourself, Fraser, is where I think you were mentioning to me, you can have a drone automatically go and do a surveillance of a premises and then land back down, but the operator can be at, let's say, a remote station. Is that correct? Am I?
You are correct, yeah. So most recently, and very exciting for ourselves, we've got a number of deployments that are operating what is called BVLoS VM. So that stands for Beyond Visual Line of Sight with Visual Mitigation. So essentially we have a remote drone operator that is located in a control room. That's generally going to be DS licensed from a CCTV perspective. And what they are, they're also trained as a drone pilot. So some of them are GVC now, some of them have done their GVC to L1 conversion. And what that allows us to do is fly the drone with a local visual mitigator. So in one of the instances, we have our remote drone operator that can either fly the drone on a routine patrol or in response to some kind of activation. They then initiate a telephone conversation with the officer that's in the locality, and it doesn't just have to be an officer; it's any subjectively trained individual. So that could be one of our customers' colleagues, or it could be obviously one of our own, and they will then essentially be the eyes and the ears of that drone pilot.
Okay.
So they will observe the local airspace and understand if there's any potential kind of risks for mitigation.
So that they have to be on a constant telephone call with them to say, I can see it, it's in sight. And does it have to be that person who is visually watching it? It has to be in their sight. It can't go, let's say, behind a building, etc.
Correct, yeah. Correct? So the termination of VM is they are the visual mitigator, so they have to have eyes on whilst kind of being on that telephone conversation. Now the really interesting and game-changing bit for us is going to be when we can switch into BVLoS AAE, so that's beyond visual line of sight in atypical air environments. Now, what that will enable us to do with the right mitigations and the right operations manual within our SORA application is be able to fly that drone without the visual mitigator. So what that will look like is potentially a transponder on the drone that's informing other users of the airspace that drone is in the sky. And I mean, some of the capability that we get by having that drone in the sky, I mean, one of the deployments flies at 35 meters, another one at 50 meters. But what that allows us to have is both we've got a zoom view, a wide view, and also a thermal view of that area. And if I think about the role that some of our officers play on sites today, where they are patrolling, obviously you can only see as well as what your eyes can see. And if we're talking about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, there could be somebody that could be hidden in a bush, for example, that would not be visible to the human eye. However, if we've got a thermal lens 50 meters in the sky, we can clearly see there's a heat signature, and we can then kind of create an exception that then means some kind of response will then occur.
And how many sites are you utilising this on at the moment?
So at the moment we're on 3 sites, so 3 different very kind of dynamic environments. So the first is a warehouse, so that's kind of standard perimeter patrolling and response to any kind of intrusion alert. The second one is a solar farm, and this is potentially one of the most interesting ones from my perspective, because this is where the drone is not only being used from a security perspective, it's actually being used operationally. So you may or may not be aware that you can use a thermal lens on a drone to identify how well a solar panel is conducting heat, therefore producing electricity. So what the drone can do on routine or ad hoc is go and do a map of the site from a thermographic view, and then there's a SaaS platform that ingests that information and turns it into real-time insights. So that's essentially a PPM for a solar farm. So you're proactively proactively preventative maintenance kind of visit and schedule. So for owners of solar farms, they're getting their ROI from a security response perspective, because they might be deploying a drone to a perimeter fence alert, but also during the day when the sun's out, they're using that drone to scan the site, which then negates the requirement for a drone pilot to travel to site and then complete that thermal mission. So really, really exciting. And then the last one is a commercial park called Team Valley. So it's the 3rd largest commercial park in Europe. There's several hundred units on there, and we use the drone from an aerial surveillance perspective because it is truly game changing. And I think one of the most impactful incidents we've had there was 2 individuals that were attempting to break into a premises. We got the drone over them. We then have CCTV footage of them looking up at the drone, then immediately scarpering back into their vehicle and making their way off site. And that's the kind of stuff that you previously wouldn't have been able to do with a traditional kind of human response, because you're talking about having to be in the right place at the right time.
Very interesting. Just sort of like touching up, I know, Peter, you guys run the guarding for a lot of large festivals, and am I right, you do the Glastonbury?
Yeah. It's one of many large events.
Many large
events as well, yeah.
How could you see the use of drones within festivals? Would it?
So we're already using them.
Oh, right, okay.
Quite significantly, yeah, on different. So the main uses we've got at the moment, one is big crowd movements. So we've looked after some of the biggest movements of crowds in the UK over the past few years. Homecoming parades, for example, NFL games,
protests and things like that. Yeah,
all sorts. But when you've got maybe 1 million people on the streets, or 500,000 people on the streets, big numbers. You really want to be able to get a view of where the crowd's going before they go there,
right?
And especially where any given area may be too dense. Crowds is one of those risks which people don't always see or think about until you're in it, and it's horrible. And the types of injuries you'd get from, or deaths from a crowd incident are significant, but people don't always worry about it until they've been there. Luckily, we work with some very good customers who do. So we've got a specialist drone operator that works with us who's got all the right licenses, etc. We'll get approval and work alongside the emergency services, and we'll deploy a crowd manager alongside them to be mapping the crowd movements out as well. And normally we've predetermined, it's like a big sort of 4-dimensional if this then that. If that street gets too busy, we put a cordon in here, or we divert people there, or this roundabout kicks into action. And you're augmenting the technology and the view with what people can do. That's one use. And there's the second use we see is on a perimeter detection at the music festival. So typically, you mentioned one very big festival there, Glastonbury. The exterior of Glastonbury, if you were to
perimeter side,
to walk around the perimeter, you're talking 10 miles or so. You can only imagine how many watchtowers we've got, how many vehicle patrols there are, how many static positions there are, and people will still try and get in. And this is could be a big problem for the site. It could become overcrowded. It affects people could be coming in with dangerous items.
Yeah.
Or it could affect the license conditions. People could be bringing drugs in. It affects the value of the ticket. So the promoters are typically very.
They're quite strong on that.
Some of them, yeah, and they will put a provision into investing to prevent those people. And I do see a big use there for drones. The sort of buyer, the promoter within music festivals are sometimes a little bit anti-technology. They've come from a different environment, and the other use we're seeing now is drones to counter drones sort of detection at racecourses. So believe it or not, a horse race. The gambling which goes on, it's really big. But if you can get a fast enough connection to the horse race, you can actually be faster than the shop, the TV, the turf makers, the turf broker, the Bet365 or done bookmakers, and you can be placing bets faster. You can get the information faster, so people will, essentially organised gamblers will try and play the system and get drones up to see the outcome of races before the shops have closed the bets.
Oh.
And they're looking to place lightning fast bets. So to combat that, we're using other our drone operators and drone detection technology to combat that.
What kind of? Because I was just last week or the week before, I was at the Intersec, and they had a lot of manufacturers have got drone detection units there and drone jammers. Now, I don't know what the legality is on the jammer side here. Detection's fine because you can detect, but are you guys using detection and jamming, or just detection?
It's probably beyond my technical capability, that question. Definitely using detection. Jamming, I'm not sure of. I know with detection, it's sort of a sort of chase game. At certain points, you can detect anything.
Yes,
and then someone creates a drone that's undetectable. Someone creates a detector for the undetectable drone, and so the percentage of drones out there that are detectable is changing at all times as well, and it's scary. And I think we only have to look at what's happened with the Russia-Ukraine war, and the use of drones there is so prevalent. And that sort of technology, when it's a question of life and death, people are working day and night on this technology to make it better and better, and some people will use that for bad things here in the UK as well.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest barriers are to utilising more drone usage? Is it regulation, safety, things like that? So I know you said a couple of sites that you're using on, but do you think we'll see more and more companies utilising the usage of drones?
I think for those that are kind of tuned in from a drone perspective, you would have noticed the kind of recent change there's been in the way that drones are labelled in the UK, and that's to kind of reflect and almost to catch up with Europe, to be honest, because if I look at what we're doing in the UK in particular, this has been kind of happening in Europe for a while now. Okay. And SORA, which is an acronym I mentioned earlier, is actually a European kind of regulatory framework that the CAA now work to, and I think from a regulatory standpoint, we're getting to a point where we kind of have to catch up. And certainly from a UK perspective, I mentioned BVLoS AAE earlier. We're actually in a position now where we're awaiting the CAA to confirm exactly what the L2 qualification looks like, so that we can then have remote drone pilots that are operating drones without a visual mitigator, because we have not yet defined what that looks like in the UK. But certainly in the past kind of 12, 18 months, we've come on leaps and bounds in terms of from where we were. I think to the safety point, I think as long as the assignment kind of instructions are being followed, and the operations manual that's been created for that site in particular is being followed, through the utilisation of drones, it will become generally a safer place, because exactly to your point, Peter, you'll be able to kind of be far more aware of the situation as it's unfolding, rather than kind of maybe hearing about it. Maybe even seconds make all the difference in that scenario, don't they?
Next question I want to ask is, how does the skill set of a good guard need to change as technology becomes more common? Because I know you said, let's say you've been in guarding for 25 years, the skill set that the guards would have had then is sort of like changes to what they've got now, because we've got all this technology, we've got video surveillance, we've got drones, we've got tablets, we've got AI, etc. What do you think needs to adopt for the guard?
I mean, I think the more tech savvy your guard is, the better. And we're looking typically now where a lot of our work is coming from. Might be with big FM companies or building managers, and we're going in and looking at the contracts that's saying spending 336 hours a week on guards. That's 2 guards all day and all night. And we're saying, hold on, we can get you a better solution, more secure, safer, better audit trails, by using less manpower and some technology and augmenting that. I mentioned 2 guards on. That might be a team of 8 guards in total.
Yeah.
And if we're in a situation where we said, actually, we're going to use 5 guards and some extra technology, which 5 guards are staying? It's the 5 who can operate that technology, and not just operate it, but maybe make minor changes to it. Help the machine to learn, for example.
Yeah, and I think ultimately a lot of it boils down to how that person's trained and engaged. So certainly from our perspective, if we're putting an officer out into a certain location, they'll be trained in such a way that they know they have at least have a very good idea of how that system is run. And I think exactly to your point, Peter, as technology progresses, you've got then the IA side of things, which is the intelligent automations, which could be, well, actually, if you detect an individual, then follow them and create an exception for me to respond to, which then in a sense makes that officer a lot more intelligence led and a lot more effective in delivering that role.
When you go to the clients and say, look, we can cut down your guard usage and utilize other technology, how acceptive are they? Say, they say, yes, okay, let's look at that, but no, we traditionally had guards, we want to keep guards. What's the kind of reaction you get?
I think we find, there's lots of stakeholders involved on a given site. So procurement will say, it's cheaper, go for it. Fine. And someone in the C-suite may say the same. But what you'll often find, especially where you've got an organisation like ours that's value-led, we've got lots of friendly people working for us. Hold on a minute, that guard welcomes everyone. That guard makes the tea and coffee. That guard fills up the milk in the coffee machine. We get all our mail delivered by the guard as well. Things which weren't necessarily in the assignment instructions,
but they just add on and do.
Yeah, they've added on and done. So it is a challenge, but equally there's other stakeholders. We've got a site now, well, several sites now, whereby we've put an AI bridge over the existing CCTV system, and it's looking for non-compliant uniform. So who's not wearing a high visibility vest? These are health and safety sites, and we've now got like you'd see typically on a production site, might have days since last accident.
Yeah.
We've got a KPI which is days since last non-wearing of high-vis vest. So, when we do find it, we can intervene straight away, but also in the event of any incident in the future, this is real good evidence. So look, we have got a safe site. I can tell you now, we've had 107 days since someone wasn't wearing a high-vis vest, and we've had 8,000 visitors all wear a high-vis vest. This guy was non-compliant, but he's gone past all the signs, and we're normally on top of this, and they'll reduce the severity of any given claim or incident on site.
And I suppose that really helps when you're trying to present that ROI back to your customer as well, right? Because you can pull a report from an Excel or a CSV that says, well, actually, here's the data that our technology has created. I think there was a really interesting scenario actually in the warehouse I was talking about, where we've deployed the drone BVLoS VM. Naturally, it's a site that has a 168, so one officer at all times. And actually, due to the fire alarm on that site not being connected to a central station or the fire brigade, that officer is actually also on fire watch as well.
Right.
But through intelligent automation in the medium to long-term plan, we have planned to have a relay out of the fire alarm that then through intelligent automation deploys the drone that can then have its thermal lens above the site to then be able to detect or not whether there is any heat signature coming from the building, and therefore rule out if it's a false alarm before we then kind of alert the relevant authority. And in the same vein, but a slightly different technology, by using radar on that site as well, we'll be able to inform local site management and also health and safety of any vehicles that are going over a certain speed, which is insights that they never previously had. So in the same way that you can give the number of days since somebody last non-conformed from a PPE perspective, we can also provide that customer with intelligent insights, I guess, from a reporting perspective to say, this is how many vehicles have been speeding on your site. Because obviously a large vehicle in a warehouse environment speeding is not something that any safety manager would welcome.
I think we're scraping the surface on this at the moment in terms of where we're at with CCTV and AI and where we can be in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And we had a conversation in the office the other day. There was an incident in Knightsbridge, a high-end jeweller. Many people will have seen it.
Saw that in the Rolex store, yes.
Yeah, and we had literally scooters, men on scooters approach the store at speed and storm into the shop. And you just think, at what point will we have cameras detecting, saying, well, the scooters go past all the time.
Yeah.
They're normally driving at 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. Here we've got a scooter, and we've got someone with face covering, and we've got 2 people on the scooter, which is weird, and they're going a bit faster than normal, and the doors lock, and the shutters come down, or some form of mitigation is intervened, and we can stay one step ahead of that type of organised criminal activity.
Big, massive knives as well.
Yeah,
I saw some. I think it was some of the public were trying to, intervene, but when they saw the size of the knives, but that's not the first time that's happened in London, has it? You'd think the high-end jewelers would have invested something a bit more within their security. Like, off the top of my head, what I would say there, it needs a smoke system, a fogging system straight away. You know, the security guard could press a button and straight away fog gets deployed. No one can see anything. But I don't know why some of the high-end retailers don't go down that road.
I think it comes back to risk appetite, right? Because I'm really balanced from that perspective, because actually, if you from a technology perspective, it'd be a great deployment of that technology. However, what you're then doing is you're potentially putting individuals in that shop, well, not even members of the public, colleagues that are employed by that business, potentially as close as me and Peter are now, with smoke around us and me having no awareness of the fact that he's brandishing a machete. And I think, just to kind of jump on the back of your point from an observation and response point of view, what I have seen, so I'm very kind of close to everything in the drone community at the moment, and what I have seen is that police forces, both locally and nationally, are investing massively into what they call the DFR program, which is a drone as a first responder. So what they're actually doing is the same dock drones that we're putting out into our commercial customers, they are putting in kind of key areas that will actually enable them to get a faster police response. Obviously, before we started recording, you spoke, Peter, about an incident that happened kind of off the beaten track. And actually, if you have the ability to send a drone as the crow flies, that could get you to an incident to respond, or potentially even prevent a hell of a lot faster than maybe human resources. I mean, I know that there are a number of individuals now that are specifically looking at drone as a first responder within policing, and that's not somebody getting a drone out of a vehicle during a police chase or something.
It's like when the helicopter gets sent out, the drone will get sent out instead.
Precisely, because essentially all the drone is compared to the helicopter is a cheaper, lighter, smaller, faster alternative.
You don't need 3 crew in there either, do you?
Precisely, yeah. You can have a single individual in a control room, and I think the advantage that they have over us right now is that because it's a state aircraft, they can do things that us as a security business can't quite. But I think it's certainly paving the way in how the future of security kind of will be augmented around us.
It's interesting you say that, and I'd say that we work with all sorts of lots of constabularies across the UK in different means, and the two I'd say which stick out to me as being most advanced in terms of the drones were Cumbria Constabulary and North Wales, and these are both very, very rural areas. Often the police are very, very stretched, because the population is so scarce. There's no proper motorways, transport networks. It's really hard to get to places. And they've been investing for a number of years now in exceptional drone technology, and they'll often bring it out to events and ask me, look, have you got any uses for us? What can we be doing? And, we'll be patrolling the car park at night looking for, people will typically go to a festival car park, Greenfield Festival. You'll see typically Eastern European gangs who've come to rob certain very specific parts from cars. We need this type of alloy wheel from a 4x4 Range Rover, for example, or we need this type of bumper from a Porsche. And, well, there's a temporary car park here with 10, 20, 30,000 vehicles on. We'll go find one. And, and so we've had the drones out doing that, and we've had them out on the perimeters as well. And the biggest sort of challenge we were getting would use thermal imagery. Would be, trying to tell the difference between a person and a sheep, for example. But tech's getting better and better.
You can pick up when the person's with the sheep as well. One topic I just want to touch on is, I don't know if you guys have come across this before, is the role of handcuffs with a private security. Now, I have seen in previous on some articles that I have read where some security firms are allowed to have handcuffs, but you tend not to see guards have them. Is there a reason? Is that related more only the police are allowed to use them, or is it that coming to restraint and all that risk assessment again?
I think certainly from our perspective, I see, we spoke about the kind of different roles that an officer will play.
Yes.
I mean, we do have individuals within our business that are restraint trained, but in order to be restraint trained, they need to go through a significant level of training that then also needs refreshing more regularly. But then also what we find is that individual needs to be really, really over aware of that kind of dynamic risk assessment to make sure that they're safe, to your point earlier, Peter, that kind of 3 to 1, and making sure that we're still kind of following the assignment instructions from our customer. I mean, sometimes we'll kind of bring together a number of our elite trained officers to kind of support the response to a serious and organised crime incident in a certain area. I don't know if there's anything that you can add to that, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, we've had restraint trained officers in the past, but as it stands, our insurer says, look, you're not doing it. No doubt, if we really wanted to and pursued it, we could get specialist insurance for it.
But it's not worth the...
Yeah, and I think there's a big emphasis. You've got to remember a couple of things. One is, once you've detained that individual, you're responsible for their safety as well. Which can be more challenging to do once the restraints are on. And there's the optics of it all as well. And then the big thing is making sure that you've got competent people and they've trained regularly with the competency as well. And I sometimes think, we are doing a bit more of the police's job, and that's fine. We're evolving into it, but there's a limit in my eyes.
Yeah. I think what's really important as well is our customers will also be really, really specific. So we've got some customers that would never go anywhere near it. Yeah. And we've got others that actually say, do you know what, if there are individuals or groups of individuals that are causing that much of a kind of impact to our people and the customers that are shopping in our premises, then extreme situations cause for kind of what we'd call an extreme response.
Yeah.
Just adding on to that, do any of your guards utilise that smart water or the smart spray? So, for example, let's say there's a shoplifter and they're running out the store, they can spray them that will tag them with that unique liquid.
We've not used it, and again, it's optics. People would look at that and say, "Is it CS gas? Is it is it pepper spray?" For one, and there'll be a liability issue with this, even though it says it's safe and stuff. I have seen an interesting concept. It was a sort of CCTV tower, like a Dalek, fitted with
the smart water thing, so it sprays one out.
I thought that was an interesting concept. Going back to robots as well.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, we've got one customer that stands out in my head that kind of insisted on it. So every single one of our officers deployed for them has a SelectaDNA canister.
And have they had to ever use it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the bit that's really important there is that the offender generally will be aware that there is a reason that's being used, and then obviously that will then stain clothing and or skin for a period of time that can then help the police in their investigation, because CCTV won't always do the job it needs to. Obviously, we spoke about face coverings and other kind of accessories that can disable CCTV in some instances, and that SelectaDNA, that customer in particular, believes it's a significant deterrent for kind of frequent and organised, frequent and persistent offenders.
I know you just touched on the Dalek towers kind of thing, and I've seen some of them inside supermarkets. I think it was a Morrison store. I think it was someone posted it onto LinkedIn that, what's the point of having this inside the supermarket when they've already got CCTV there? Have you guys ever come across something like that?
We actually have our own version that we call our WASP, and it was initially actually created for construction site security.
Yes.
And as we've evolved as a business and as the product has evolved, we've ended up having kind of a retail WASP, and we've got a number of our customers that where they can't quite make the kind of ROI get to where it needs to be from a deployment of a guard perspective, they can put this equipment in, and then through intelligent automation we can get it to do any number of things. So it might be, if you detect a human play this sound out of the speaker, and that could be a very welcoming kind of gesture. So the one that I've got kind of in the forefront of my head right now is, like I say, if person detected, play this sound, and it is welcome to X. This security asset is here to support our colleagues and our customers. If you need any help, please find a colleague. And essentially, depending on the role of an officer, sometimes that will be enough to kind of meet that requirement.
Okay. And I suppose cameras over the years, they've got smaller and smaller, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, we had more traditional cameras when they first came out, and then we moved to dome cameras, and then we've got tiny dome cameras and cameras hidden away. And you can't get away from the fact that, you know, a big part of security is the deterrence. And there's nothing more deterring than seeing that type of system there. You know, and as a shoplifter, I've got a choice today of exactly where I'm going to go and steal from. There's a shop with that and a shop without it. Which one am I going to? So.
And I think the fact that it's been photographed and then posted is also beneficial, right? Yeah, because actually somebody has spotted that. It is out of the ordinary. Rather than having a camera that might be mounted at
it's more 10, like your eye level, isn't
10,
it?
12 foot in the air, it could be at kind of 4, 5, 6, which actually, if you've got that kind of old swag bag and a cap, that might be where you can evade CCTV. Whereas if you've got a deterrent that's at eye line, it makes things a bit more difficult.
Yeah. I want to ask one of the final questions is, where do you see the guarding evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? So the role of a guard, I know we discussed it, what it used to be 10, 15 years ago, and now we've had technology come in. Where do you see it moving over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think one thing we haven't spoke about very much today is kind of intelligence and risk. And I think that's kind of one of the main differences I've seen in the past kind of few years. And I only see that getting better and better as we have kind of tools, kind of any kind of AI or large language model that has the ability to kind of scour through hundreds of thousands of lines of data in milliseconds. I think we're heading towards a point where our guards will kind of be super intelligence led, coordinated, and exactly to your point earlier, Peter, kind of exception, be that kind of exception response. So yes, there's always going to be a part for them to play in kind of welcoming and greeting, but actually making sure that the second something occurs that's either out of the ordinary or they should be aware of, they can then respond to it. And obviously technology means that can happen faster, and as technology evolves, that ultimately becomes cheaper.
Yeah, and I think you've got a brilliant point in about that fast response, but then using the intelligence to think actually before a response, there's prediction, isn't there? You know, we know that thefts always occur between
such
9 and 11 at that store, and
and
being able to up the ante and stay one step ahead of the criminal. But there's an awful lot going on in the security guarding space at the moment, and a lot of change, a lot of potential regulatory change. We've got problems for the better. Yeah, we've got problems as an industry. You know, labour exploitation is still. I
see
rife.
that every other day. I see someone complaining on LinkedIn that you know, these people are charging X amount. It's costing me this amount. How's it even possible?
Yeah, I was offered guards this weekend for £13.50. They cost, you know, by the time you've paid, trained, uniformed, supervised, the minimum they can cost is £17 an hour. I'm getting them offered at £13.50. So there's the labour exploitation is a big one, and the guard at the end of that chain, the quality of where they're at, the conditions which they're living. You know, there'll be modern day slavery with that labour exploitation. And there's the training malpractice. You've seen exposés on the television recently.
Just going in, people doing the exams and got the.
We've got 650 training organisations in the UK. Those training organisations report into 6 or 7 awarding organisations who report into Ofqual, who report into the SIA. That chain's too long, and you know the person training you is also examining you. The training needs to change. We talked earlier about some of the categories of licence holders that could change. And the biggest one is the regulation around businesses. So the government, the Home Office, through the SIA, is licensing 500,000 people. But, someone listening today could go home, spend 40 quid on company's house, set up a security company today, tomorrow they're in business. Who is that individual? At the moment, they could be taking on contracts, securing places where the public are present, getting a back door in to some busy public spaces. What is counter-terrorism? A lot of it is just good security. If you're doing good security, you're probably doing good CT and vice versa. The overlap is gigantic. The mandatory business licensing to affect the supply, to get rid of the rogue operators who are dragging our industry down, and the SIA, through their exceptional leadership and good governance, to keep developing the training standards for the individuals. I'd like to see the industry professionalise even further. What I'd love to see is kids at school being able to turn around to their teacher and say, when I finish school, I'm going to be a security guard. And the teacher saying, what a fantastic career. That's what I'd love to see.
Am I right in thinking you're on that board of the S12 that came out recently?
Yeah.
And you're on one of the...
Yeah, so I'm deputy chair at the S12, and that's a industry-elected group of individuals, SIA, and the leaders at the SIA. And the SIA do an exceptional job, but sometimes their hands are tied with the powers that they've got. They're operating to legislation that came out 25 years ago now, and it's time for a review to make sure that we can go to the next level. The expectation from society has changed, the need has changed, the threat has changed. 2001, the terror threat was very different, for example.
Yeah.
The number of police has not grown, it's shrank over that period of time. So the S12 is here to help make sure we can evolve as an industry faster than ever before, and I think we will see some big gains over the next few years.
And Peter, do you think there's a part that technology can play from an S12 point of view?
Definitely. I think we need to keep reviewing, for example, the SIA and the way we train. Are we doing enough to train the officers on the use of technology? It's very open at the moment. There is some use of technology which gets thrown in, but gets passed from the SIA to the Home Office, from the Home Office to the SIA to the awarding organisations, the awarding bodies and Ofqual, and then to the 650 training organisations. They all interpret it differently.
And it's being diluted.
Yeah, so some training courses are like, here's a handheld radio, press this button to talk. We've had them for 20 years. Versus another one might be saying, right, this is a building management system, and here we're going to suppress the fire system. Or, very, very different, and how it's interpreted. So there's more we can do, and that's through a lack of understanding, but also the rate of change that we're going through as well with technology. It's looking very different today than it was a year ago, 2 years ago.
I guess previously we had people announcing who they were over a radio, whereas nowadays it'll probably be telling them exactly who it is that's talking on the radio, for example. Yeah,
we've got devices. We have body-worn CCTV, which is 5G enabled. So it goes back to a control room.
Back to a station,
we know the officers are preferring to use that. That's also got a radio capability that will work as a two-way radio, but also over 5G if need be. And they're preferring that. So they might carry a radio on that and not use the radio. So, yeah.
Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much for taking time out and coming onto this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
We get a lot of people watching these conversations, but not everyone follows the show. If you find this useful, subscribing and following Room Secured really helps us keep doing these. That was a really good conversation. If you found it useful, make sure you're following Room Secured. We'll see you on the next one.